The morning sky over Earth turned dark as massive ships appeared without warning. They were not human ships. The alien vessels hung in space like metal mountains, each one larger than the biggest cities on Earth. Their hulls gleamed with strange metals that reflected the sunlight in ways that hurt to look at directly. Admiral Clark Peterson stood in the command center at Pentagon, watching the radar screens with growing fear. The numbers made no sense. Each alien ship was 10 times bigger than Earth's largest battleship. There were 47 of them spread across Earth's orbit, and more kept appearing every few minutes. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Lieutenant Kate Brown, her voice shaking as she worked at her station. "It's coming from the biggest ship." "Put it on the main screen," Peterson ordered, though his stomach was already turning cold with dread. The screen flickered and showed something that would give humans nightmares for years to come. The alien looked like a giant insect crossed with a machine. Its body was covered in dark armor that seemed to move and shift on its own. 6 arms emerged from its torso, each ending in claws that could probably tear through steel. Its head was triangular with dozens of eyes that glowed red in the darkness. When it spoke, its voice came through in perfect English, though it sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Humans of Earth, I am War Commander Thexver of the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered 43 star systems. Your world will be the 44th. The creature's eyes seemed to look directly at Peterson through the screen. "You have 72 of your hours to surrender completely. All weapons must be destroyed. All military forces must submit to our control. If you refuse, we will crack your planet like an egg and feed the pieces to our ships." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in complete silence. General Lisa Martinez burst through the doors a moment later, her uniform wrinkled and her face pale. She had been in a meeting with world leaders when the aliens arrived. "What's the situation, Clark?" Peterson pointed at the screen showing the alien fleet. "They want us to surrender in 3 days or they'll destroy the planet. Our best estimates say each of those ships has enough firepower to level entire continents." Martinez studied the tactical display, her military mind working through possibilities. She had spent 20 years planning for wars against other human nations, but nothing had prepared her for this. "What about our orbital defense platforms?" "Useless," Peterson replied grimly. "Our biggest guns would barely scratch their smallest ship. It would be like throwing rocks at a tank." Across the world, emergency broadcasts interrupted every television show, radio program, and internet stream. People stopped what they were doing and stared at screens showing the alien fleet. In New York, traffic came to a complete halt as drivers abandoned their cars to look up at the sky. In London, crowds gathered in the streets, pointing at the dark shapes visible even in daylight. In Tokyo, millions of people stood on rooftops and in parks, trying to see the invaders with their own eyes. The panic started slowly, then spread like wildfire. Grocery stores emptied as people bought everything they could carry. Gas stations ran out of fuel as families tried to drive to what they thought might be safer places. Banks closed their doors as people demanded all their money. The stock markets crashed within hours. In Detroit, Michigan, Jake Murphy was lying under a broken hover truck in his small repair shop when his ancient radio started broadcasting the emergency signal. The sharp beeping sound made him slide out from under the vehicle, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. Jake was 35 years old, with short brown hair and arms covered in small scars from years of working with tools and machinery. His father had owned this garage before him, and Jake had learned to fix everything from coffee makers to spacecraft engines during his time in the Navy. After his service ended, he came home to take over the family business. He turned up the radio volume and listened to the news report with growing amazement. Alien invasion, surrender or die. 72 hours. It sounded like something from a bad movie, except the fear in the reporter's voice was real. Jake walked outside his shop and looked up at the sky. He could see them now, dark spots against the blue that his eyes wanted to ignore. They were so big that they looked like they were close, but he knew they had to be hundreds of miles above Earth. His neighbor, Mrs. Helen Davis, came running out of her house with tears streaming down her face. "Jake, did you hear? They're going to kill us all." "Easy, Helen," Jake said calmly, though his own heart was beating fast. "Let's not panic just yet." But panic was exactly what was happening everywhere else. The president addressed the nation that evening, trying to sound confident while announcing that all military forces were being placed on highest alert. Behind him, Jake could see advisors whispering frantically and passing notes back and forth. "We will not surrender to these invaders," the president declared. "Humanity has faced threats before and survived. We will face this one too." Jake watched the speech from his small apartment above the garage, eating a cold sandwich while studying the images of alien ships that news channels showed over and over. Something about their design bothered him, but he could not figure out what. As night fell, the alien ships became even more visible. They had lights running along their hulls that pulsed in patterns like heartbeats. The light was not white or yellow like human lights, but a sickly green color that made everything look wrong. Admiral Peterson had not slept in 18 hours. He stood in the Pentagon's main war room, surrounded by screens showing Earth's military forces preparing for what everyone knew would be a hopeless battle. The world's navies were moving toward the alien ships, knowing they would probably all die in the attempt to defend Earth. "Sir," Lieutenant Brown called out, "we're getting technical readings from the alien ships. Our sensors are picking up massive energy signatures." Peterson looked at the data flowing across the screens. The power output from just one alien ship was greater than Earth's entire electrical grid. "How do we fight something like that?" "We don't," General Martinez said quietly. She had been studying the tactical situation for hours. "Our missiles can't penetrate their shields. Our energy weapons don't have enough power. Even if we used nuclear weapons, we'd probably just make them angry." The second day brought no hope. Radio telescopes detected more alien ships jumping into the solar system every few hours. Earth's space-based telescopes showed the aliens had some kind of faster-than-light travel that human science said was impossible. Jake spent that day working on the hover truck, trying to keep his hands busy while his mind worried about the future. The news played constantly on his radio, reporting the same terrible facts over and over. Alien ships, superior technology, 72 hours to surrender or die. But something still bothered him about the alien ships. During his lunch break, he pulled up every image he could find on his old computer. The ships were huge and intimidating, but their design followed rules that seemed familiar. The way their hulls curved, the placement of what looked like weapon ports, the patterns of lights running along their sides, it reminded him of something. But he could not remember what. As the second night fell and Earth faced its final day of freedom, Jake Murphy sat in his garage with a wrench in his hand, staring at pictures of alien warships on his computer screen, and slowly began to understand what everyone else had missed. The aliens had made a mistake. A big one. Jake Murphy woke up before dawn on the final day. He had spent most of the night staring at images of the alien ships on his computer, making notes on scraps of paper and drawing diagrams with a pencil. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but his mind was wide awake. The thing that bothered him about the alien ships was finally becoming clear. They looked advanced and powerful, but their design followed the same basic rules that every machine followed. Power had to flow from one place to another. Systems had to connect to work together. And every connection was a potential point of failure. Jake had learned this lesson the hard way during his 8 years in the Navy. He had worked on everything, from simple generators to the massive fusion reactors that powered Earth's biggest warships. The more complex a system became, the more ways it could break down. And when something broke, It usually broke in predictable ways. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he had not called in 2 years. It rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered. Captain Roy Collins speaking. "Roy, it's Jake Murphy. We served together on the USS Denver." There was a pause. "Jake? Man, it's been forever. Look, if you're calling about the alien thing, I'm kind of busy saving the world right now." "That's exactly why I'm calling," Jake said. "I think I know how to stop them." Roy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jake, you fix trucks for a living. These aliens have technology we can't even understand." "That's where you're wrong," Jake replied. "I've been studying their ships all night. They're using the same basic engineering principles as everything else: power distribution, system integration, load balancing. It's just bigger and fancier." "What are you talking about?" Jake looked at his drawings spread across the workbench. "Their ships are all connected, Roy. Look at the energy patterns. They're sharing power between vessels through some kind of wireless network. It makes them incredibly efficient, but it also makes them vulnerable." "Vulnerable how?" "If you can disrupt the main power distribution node, the feedback will cascade through their entire fleet. It's like when you blow a fuse in an old house and half the lights go out." Roy was quiet for a long moment. In the background, Jake could hear alarms and people shouting orders. "Jake, even if you're right, how would we get close enough to do anything about it? Their shields can stop nuclear missiles." "Not through their shields," Jake said. "Through their maintenance systems. Every machine needs maintenance access. These ships are too big to service from the inside only. They have to have external ports for major repairs. And you think you can just walk up and sabotage an alien warship?" Jake looked at the toolbox sitting on his workbench. "I think I can fix their problem permanently." Roy sighed heavily. "Jake, I'm going to put you on hold for a minute. Don't hang up." Jake waited, listening to classical music play over the phone while the world prepared for its final battle. Outside his garage, he could hear sirens in the distance and the sound of military aircraft flying overhead. "Jake, you still there?" Roy's voice came back on the line. "Still here. I talked to some people. They want to hear your idea. Can you get to Andrews Air Force Base in the next 2 hours?" Jake looked around his small garage. Tools hung on the walls where his father had placed them 30 years ago. The hover truck still needed its transmission fixed. Mrs. Davis would probably want him to look at her air conditioning unit next week. "Yeah," he said. "I can be there." 2 hours later, Jake found himself in a conference room filled with the most important military officers on Earth. Admiral Peterson sat at the head of the table, his uniform perfect, despite the fact that he had not slept in 2 days. General Martinez paced back and forth near a wall covered with tactical displays showing the alien fleet. "Mr. Murphy," Admiral Peterson began, "Captain Collins says you have a theory about how to disable the alien ships." Jake felt out of place in his work clothes surrounded by all the military uniforms. "Yes, sir. Their ships are using a networked power distribution system. If we can overload the main node, it should shut down their entire fleet." General Martinez stopped pacing. "How? Do you know this?" Jake pulled out his hand-drawn diagrams and spread them on the conference table. The drawings looked crude compared to the high-tech displays on the walls, but they showed his understanding of the alien technology clearly. "I've been studying the energy patterns from your sensor data," Jake explained. "The power flows between their ships in a specific sequence. Ship A powers up, then transfers excess energy to Ship B, which passes it to Ship C, and so on. It's a brilliant design that lets them maximize their efficiency, but it has a fatal flaw." "Which is?" Admiral Peterson asked. "No redundancy. If the main power coupling fails, the whole network crashes. It's like a house of cards built out of electricity." A Colonel Jake did not recognize leaned forward. "Even if you're right, How do we reach their main ship? Our fighters can't get through. Their defenses. We don't go through their defenses, Jake said. We go around them. Every ship that size needs external maintenance ports for major repairs. The aliens probably don't even consider them security risks because they're designed for service crews. Not weapons. General Martinez studied Jake's diagrams. What would you need to do this? A small ship that can get close without being detected. Basic tools. And someone who understands how power systems work. You're talking about a suicide mission, Admiral Peterson said quietly. Jake nodded. Probably, but it's better than surrendering. Or watching them destroy the planet. The room fell silent. Outside, Jake could hear the rumble of Earth's military forces moving into position for what everyone knew would be a hopeless battle. Every ship, every plane, every soldier Earth had was preparing to fight an enemy they could not defeat. Sir, a young lieutenant interrupted, entering the room with a tablet. We're getting reports from our forward scouts. The alien ships are beginning to power up their main weapons. Intelligence estimates they'll begin planetary bombardment in 6 hours. If we don't surrender. Admiral Peterson looked at the tactical displays, then at Jake's simple drawings, then back at the displays. Mr. Murphy, what are the chances your plan will work? Jake thought about all the machines he had fixed over the years. Broken engines. That everyone said were hopeless. Electrical systems that had failed in ways the manuals said were impossible. Complex problems that turned out to have simple solutions. I don't know, he said honestly. But I know that every machine can be broken if you understand how it works, and I understand how their ships work. General Martinez made the decision. We'll give you a ship and a volunteer pilot. What tools do you need? Jake smiled for the first time in 2 days. Just the basics. A good wrench, some wire cutters, electrical tape, and a small welding torch. Sometimes the simplest tools are the best ones. An hour later, Jake stood in a military hangar looking at a small shuttle. Craft. The pilot was a woman about his age with short blonde hair and the confident look of someone who had flown in dangerous situations before. I'm Amy Foster, she said, shaking Jake's hand. I used to test experimental aircraft before I joined the civilian space program. Roy Collins says you have a plan to save the world with a wrench. Jake hefted his old toolbox. Something like that. You sure you want to do this? Like the Admiral said, it's probably a one-way trip. Amy looked out the hangar doors at the alien ships visible in the afternoon sky. My daughter lives in Denver. My parents live in Miami. If those things start shooting, everyone I care about is going to die anyway. Jake nodded. He understood that feeling. Then let's go fix their problem. As Earth's military forces engaged the alien fleet in what appeared to be a desperate final battle, a small shuttle launched from Andrews Air Force Base. Inside, a mechanic from Detroit checked his tools one more time while a test pilot prepared to fly them both into the heart of the enemy fleet. The real battle was about to begin. Amy Foster guided the small shuttle through the chaos of space as Earth's military fought desperately against the alien fleet. Explosions lit up the darkness around them like deadly fireworks. Human ships were being destroyed every few minutes. But their sacrifice was creating the confusion Jake and Amy needed. There, Jake pointed through the shuttle's front window at the massive alien flagship. That's the one we need to reach. The ship was enormous. Up close, it looked less like a vehicle and more like a floating city made of dark metal. Strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Weapon ports the size of football fields glowed with deadly energy as they fired at Earth's defenders. How are we supposed to get inside that thing? Amy asked, dodging debris from a destroyed human cruiser. Jake studied the alien ship through binoculars, looking for what he hoped would be there. Every ship needs maintenance access. Something that big has to have external service ports for major repairs. A human destroyer exploded nearby, its death lighting up the alien ship's hull. In that brief moment of brightness, Jake saw what he was looking for. There. He pointed to a section near the ship's rear. See those rectangular panels? Those are maintenance hatches. They're probably not even guarded, because the aliens don't think anyone would be crazy enough to try boarding their flagship. Amy turned the shuttle toward the alien ship, using the wreckage of human vessels as cover. This is insane, you know. That, right. Yeah, Jake replied, checking his toolbox one more time. But it's the good kind of insane. The shuttle was tiny compared to the alien flagship. As they got closer, Jake could see that the ship's hull was covered in a metal he had never seen before. It seemed to shift and move slightly, as if it were alive. Strange symbols were carved into the surface, glowing with the same sickly green light as the ship's other systems. I'm reading massive energy signatures from their hull, Amy reported, watching her instruments. Whatever that metal is, it's conducting incredible amounts of power. That's good, Jake said. It means we're in the right place. Amy skillfully brought the shuttle alongside one of the maintenance hatches. The rectangular panel was about twice the size of their shuttle, but it had smaller access ports around its edges that looked like they were meant for service vehicles. Can you dock us with that smaller port? Jake asked. I can try. Amy fired. The shuttle's maneuvering thrusters, bringing them slowly toward the alien hull. Jake, what if their hull is electrified or something? We could be flying into a trap. Then we'll find out together. Jake replied calmly. The shuttle's docking clamps engaged with the alien maintenance port with a soft thud. Both humans held their breath, waiting for alarms or weapons fire, but nothing happened. Looks like they really don't consider this a security risk, Amy said. Jake was already putting on his emergency spacesuit. Makes sense. Who would be stupid enough to try boarding an alien warship with a toolbox? Us, apparently. Jake activated the shuttle's airlock and found himself looking at an alien access hatch. The design was different from human technology, but the basic concept was the same. Every machine needed a way for repair crews to get inside. The alien hatch had symbols instead of words, but Jake could see what looked like manual controls. He tried pressing different combinations until he heard a hissing sound. The hatch slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel that led deeper into the ship. I'm in, Jake told Amy through his radio. Keep the shuttle ready for a quick exit. Be careful in there, Amy replied. I'll monitor their communications and warn you if they figure out what we're doing. Jake crawled through the maintenance tunnel with his toolbox strapped to his back. The tunnel was just big enough for him to move through, and it was filled with cables and pipes that carried power and fluids throughout the massive ship. The air smelled like ozone and something else he could not identify. After 10 minutes of crawling, Jake reached a larger chamber. He emerged from the tunnel and found himself in what was clearly an engineering section. The room was huge, filled with machinery that hummed and pulsed with alien energy. Crystalline structures as tall as buildings channeled power through conduits that disappeared into the ship's deeper levels. Amy, I'm in their engineering section, Jake whispered into his radio. This place is incredible. They're using some kind of crystal-based power system. Can you find their main power coupling? Jake looked around the chamber. The alien machinery was unlike anything he had ever seen, but he could follow the flow of energy through the system. Thick cables led from the crystal structures to a central hub that glowed brighter than everything else. Found it, he said. At the center of the chamber stood a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with energy. Power flowed into it from dozens of sources throughout the ship, and then flowed back out through connections that Jake realized must link to the other ships in the fleet. This is it, Jake told Amy. This is their main power distribution node. All the energy for their entire fleet flows through this one point. Jake approached the crystal structure carefully. Up close, he could see that it was not just one piece. but hundreds of smaller crystals connected together in a complex network. Power flowed between them in patterns of light that were almost hypnotic to watch. "Jake, I'm picking up alien communications." Amy's voice crackled through his radio. "I think they're starting to suspect something. You need to work fast." Jake opened his toolbox and pulled out his adjustable wrench. The tool looked ridiculously simple compared to the advanced alien technology surrounding him, but Jake knew that sometimes simple was exactly what you needed. He studied the crystal structure, looking for the connection points that held the system together. The aliens had built their power network for maximum efficiency, but that also made it fragile. If he could disrupt the right connections in the right order, the feedback would cascade through their entire fleet. "There," Jake said to himself. Spotting what he needed at the base of the main crystal were several connection points that looked like they could be loosened with the right tools. They were not hidden or protected because the aliens probably never imagined someone would try to sabotage their system manually. Jake got to work with his wrench, carefully loosening the first connection point. The crystal's glow flickered slightly, but the system continued working. He moved to the second connection and loosened it as well. "Jake, you need to hurry." Amy's voice was urgent now. "I'm seeing alien patrol ships heading this way. I think they figured out we're here." Jake worked faster, but he had to be careful. If he disrupted the connections too quickly, the system would shut down safely instead of cascading into failure. He needed to create an imbalance that would build slowly until it became unstoppable. The third connection came loose, and now the crystal structure was beginning to pulse irregularly. Jake could see the power flows becoming unstable as the system tried to compensate for the missing connections. "Almost done," Jake told Amy, moving to the fourth and final connection point. "Jake, they're sending guards to your location. You have maybe 2 minutes." Jake's hands worked steadily with the wrench, loosening the final connection point with practiced precision. As the connection came free, the entire crystal structure began to pulse erratically. Power surged through the system in ways it was not designed to handle. "That should do it," Jake said, pulling a piece of electrical tape from his toolbox. He carefully placed the tape over a sensor that would have detected the loose connections, ensuring that the alien computers would not immediately identify the problem. "Jake, get out of there now." Amy shouted through the radio. Jake grabbed his toolbox and ran for the maintenance tunnel as alarms began sounding throughout the alien ship. Behind him, the crystal structure was beginning to overload as the power imbalance spread through the system. He crawled through the tunnel as fast as he could while the ship shook around him. The aliens had finally realized something was wrong, but they could not figure out what. Their sophisticated computers were looking for complex sabotage, not simple mechanical failure. Jake reached the shuttle just as Amy started the engines. "Go, go, go." The shuttle detached from the alien hull and accelerated away from the flagship as the power cascade began spreading through the Zephyrian fleet. One by one, the massive alien warships began to flicker and dim as their power systems failed. "It's working," Amy said in amazement, watching the alien fleet on her instruments. "Jake, it's actually working." Behind them, War Commander Thexver stared at his control panels in disbelief as his invincible fleet began shutting down around him. In less than 10 minutes, a human mechanic with a wrench had done what Earth's entire military could not accomplish. The cascade failure spread through the Zephyrian fleet like a disease. Jake and Amy watched from their small shuttle as the massive alien warships began losing power one after another. The ships that had seemed invincible just minutes before now drifted helplessly in space, their weapons silent and their shields flickering out of existence. "I can't believe it actually worked," Amy said, staring at her instrument readings. "Their entire fleet is shutting down." Jake was equally amazed, but he knew they were not safe yet. "We need to get back to Earth and report what happened." The military needs to know the aliens are helpless now. As their shuttle turned toward Earth, alarms started blaring throughout the alien flagship. War Commander Vexver stood in his command center, watching his screens show one system failure after another. His 6 arms moved frantically over his control panels, trying to understand what was happening to his perfect fleet. Report, Vexver commanded his crew in their harsh alien language. Sir, we are experiencing total power grid failure, replied his chief engineer, a smaller alien with 4 arms instead of 6. The main distribution crystal has become unstable. Power levels are dropping across all ships in the fleet. Huh. Is this possible? Our systems are perfect. They cannot fail. The engineer studied his readings with growing confusion. Sir, the failure appears to have started in our ship's primary engineering section. But our sensors show no signs of attack or sabotage. The connections have simply come loose. Vexver's many eyes focused on the engineer with deadly intensity. Connections do not simply come loose. Find the cause and fix it immediately. But even as his crew worked desperately to restore power, Vexver could see that something fundamental had gone wrong. The power distribution network that made his fleet so efficient had become its greatest weakness. As each ship lost power, the remaining ships had to carry more load, which caused them to overload and shut down even faster. On Earth, Admiral Peterson watched the tactical displays with growing amazement. Are you seeing this? He asked General Martinez. The alien ships are going dark one by one, Martinez replied, hardly believing her own words. Whatever Murphy did, it's working. Lieutenant Brown looked up from her station with excitement in her voice. Sir, we're getting a transmission from Murphy's shuttle. They're returning to base. Put them through, Peterson ordered. Jake's voice came through the speakers, calm despite what he had just accomplished. Control, this is Murphy. Mission successful. The alien power grid is in complete cascade failure. Their fleet should be completely disabled within the next hour. Jake, what did you do over there? General Martinez asked. I loosened a few connection points and covered a sensor with electrical tape, Jake replied simply. Their power distribution system had no redundancy for manual failure. When the connections came loose, the system tried to compensate, but couldn't handle the load imbalance. Admiral Peterson shook his head in amazement. A mechanic with a wrench just defeated the most advanced alien fleet in the galaxy. Back on the alien flagship, Vexver was beginning to understand the scope of the disaster. His chief engineer approached him cautiously, knowing that bad news often resulted in painful consequences. Sir, we have identified the cause of the failure, the engineer said nervously. Explain. Someone manually loosened the connection points on our main power crystal. The sabotage was crude but effective. They also disabled the sensor that would have detected the loose connections. Vexver's eyes glowed brighter with rage. You are telling me that our entire fleet has been defeated by manual sabotage? Someone used simple tools to destroy our perfect technology? Yes, sir. The saboteur appears to have understood our power distribution system well enough to create a cascade failure. It was not sophisticated, but it was precise. For the first time in his long military career, Vexver felt something he had never experienced before: respect for an enemy. The humans had done something no other species had managed in 43 conquered star systems. They had found a weakness in Zephyrian technology that the Zephyrians themselves had never considered. Sir, another crew member called out, we are receiving a transmission from the human military. Put it through, Vexver ordered. Admiral Peterson's face appeared on the alien ship's main screen. Commander Vexver, I am Admiral Peterson of Earth's military forces. Your fleet is now completely disabled. We are prepared to discuss terms for your surrender. Vexver looked at the human admiral with new understanding. Admiral Peterson, may I ask how you accomplished this defeat? Our technology is far superior to yours. Peterson smiled slightly. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones, Commander. We sent our best engineer to solve your problem. One engineer defeated our entire fleet. One engineer with the right tools and the right knowledge, Peterson confirmed. Vexver was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that thought like humans did. Other races had tried to defeat his fleet with bigger weapons or more advanced technology. The humans had simply figured out how to break what they could not overpower. Admiral Peterson, I request permission to speak with this engineer. I'll see what I can do. An hour later, Jake sat in the Pentagon conference room, still wearing his work clothes and carrying his toolbox. Across from him on the main screen was the fearsome visage of War Commander Vexvar. You are the one who sabotaged our fleet? Vexvar asked. Yes, sir, Jake replied simply. I'm sorry if I caused any permanent damage to your ships. I tried to make sure the shutdown would be clean. Vexvar was amazed by this response. You apologize for defeating us? Jake shrugged. I'm a mechanic. I don't like breaking things that can't be fixed. Your power system is actually pretty impressive. It just needed better redundancy controls. How did you understand our technology so quickly? All machines work on the same basic principles, Jake explained. Power has to flow from one place to another. Systems have to connect to work together. The bigger and more complex a system gets, the more ways it can fail. Your ships were really efficient, but efficiency and reliability don't always go together. Vexvar studied this human, who had defeated his entire fleet with simple tools. What would you do to improve our design? Jake thought for a moment. Well, you'd want to add circuit breakers to prevent cascade failures. Maybe some backup power routing so individual ship failures don't affect the whole fleet. And you should definitely put better security on your maintenance ports. You would help us improve our technology, even after we threaten to destroy your world. Technology is technology, Jake said. It should work right, regardless of who built it. Besides, maybe if your ships were more reliable, you wouldn't need to go around conquering other planets. For the first time in his life, Vexvar laughed. It was a strange sound, like metal grinding against stone, but it was definitely laughter. Human, you have defeated us in a way no other species has managed. Your approach to problem solving is ... unique. We call it common sense, Jake replied. Admiral Peterson leaned forward. Commander Vexvar, what are your intentions now? Your fleet is disabled, but we're willing to discuss peaceful solutions. Vexvar looked at his crew, then back at the humans on his screen. His entire understanding of warfare and conquest had been challenged by a mechanic with a wrench. Perhaps it was time for the Zephyrian Empire to learn new ways of thinking. Admiral Peterson, I believe we have much to discuss, and I would like to continue speaking with your engineer. He has shown me that there are different ways to solve problems than the ones we have always used. Jake picked up his wrench and looked at it thoughtfully. Sometimes the oldest tools are still the best ones, Commander. You just have to know how to use them. The war that could have destroyed Earth was ending not with explosions and death, but with a conversation between enemies who were beginning to understand each other. And it had all started with a mechanic who knew that every machine, no matter how advanced, could be fixed or broken by someone who understood how it worked. 3 days after the invasion that never happened, Jake Murphy stood in his garage working on Mrs. Davis's air conditioning unit. The news crews had finally stopped camping outside his shop, and the government officials had stopped calling every hour. The world was slowly returning to normal, though normal would never be quite the same again. The door to his garage opened and Amy Foster walked in, no longer wearing a military flight suit, but simple civilian clothes. She carried 2 cups of coffee and had a big smile on her face. Thought you might need some caffeine, she said, handing him one of the cups. Thanks, Jake replied, wiping his hands on a rag. How are things at the Space Center? Crazy busy. Turns out the aliens want to establish a permanent diplomatic mission on Earth, and they specifically asked for me to be their liaison pilot. Something about trusting someone who is brave enough to fly a suicide mission. Jake sipped his coffee and looked out the window. He could see one of the Zephyrian ships in the distance, much smaller than the warships, but still impressive. War. Commander Thexver had insisted on staying in Earth's orbit to oversee the beginning of what he called a new era of cooperation between their species. Any word on when they'll finish repairing their fleet? Jake asked. Amy laughed. That's the funny part. Thexver says they don't want to repair it the old way. He wants human engineers to help them redesign their power systems with better redundancy. Apparently, he's become obsessed with the idea of making their technology more reliable. Jake had spent several hours over the past few days talking with Zephyrian engineers through video links. The aliens were amazed by human approaches to problem solving. Were they designed for maximum efficiency? Humans designed for reliability and ease of repair. Where they built systems that worked perfectly until they failed catastrophically, humans built systems that could limp along even when half broken. The president wants to give you another medal, Amy said. I told him I have enough medals. What I really need is for people to stop treating me like some kind of hero. I just fixed a broken machine. You saved the world, Jake. I did my job, same as any mechanic would do. Amy studied his face and realized he really meant it. To Jake, defeating an alien invasion fleet was just another repair job that needed doing. She found that attitude both amazing and completely typical of the man who had become the most famous person on Earth. The garage door opened again, and Roy Collins walked in, still wearing his Navy uniform but looking more relaxed than he had in days. Jake, we need to talk, Roy said. If this is about another interview or ceremony, the answer is still no. Actually, it's about something else. The Navy wants to offer you a job. Jake raised an eyebrow. I already did my time in the Navy, Roy. This would be different. They want to create a new department for unconventional problem solving. Someone who can look at impossible situations and find simple solutions. They're calling it the Department of Practical Engineering. And they want me to run it? They want you to be it. Your own department, your own budget, your own rules. You'd report directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Jake thought about this while he worked on Mrs. Davis's air conditioner. The unit was old and had been repaired many times, but it still worked because someone had built it to be fixable. That was good engineering. What kind of problems would I be solving? The kind that don't have obvious solutions. The kind that need someone who thinks differently than everyone else. Amy smiled. You mean the kind where everyone else is thinking about complex, technical solutions and you're thinking about which wrench to use? Something like that, Roy agreed. Jake finished adjusting the air conditioner and turned it on. The unit hummed to life, blowing cool air through the garage. Another machine fixed, another problem solved. I'll think about it, Jake said finally. That evening, Jake sat on the roof of his garage watching the sunset. The Zephyrian ships were visible in the sky like new stars, a reminder that Earth was no longer alone in the universe. But somehow, that did not seem as frightening as it had a week ago. His phone rang. The caller ID showed an international number he did not recognize. Hello, Jake answered. Mr. Murphy, this is Dr. Elena Petrov from the European Space Agency. I know you have been receiving many calls, but I wanted to speak with you about something important. What can I do for you, Dr. Petrov? We have been monitoring signals from deep space, and we have detected what appears to be another alien fleet approaching our solar system. They will arrive in approximately 6 months. Jake sat up straighter. Are they hostile? We do not know yet. But the Zephyrians have told us these new aliens are called the Hegemony, and they are much more aggressive than the Zephyrian Empire ever was. War Commander Thexver believes they will not be interested in negotiation. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about this new problem. What do the Zephyrians say about their technology? According to Thexver, the Hegemony uses completely different principles than Zephyrian technology. Their ships are more heavily armored, their weapons are more powerful, and their systems are designed specifically to prevent the kind of sabotage you used against the Zephyrians. So my wrench trick won't work twice. Probably not. But we are hoping you might be able to find a different approach. Jake looked up at the stars and thought about machines. Every machine had weaknesses, even if they were not obvious. The key was understanding how the machine worked and finding the point where it could be convinced to stop working. Dr. Petrov, can you send me all the technical data the Zephyrians have about the Hegemony? Of course. Does this mean you will help us? Jake stood up and walked back toward his garage. Through the windows he could see his tools hanging on the walls where his father had put them, where his grandfather had put them before that. Generations of mechanics who had solved problems by understanding how things worked and knowing which tool to use. Yeah, Jake said. I'll help, but I'm going to need a bigger toolbox. 6 months later, when the Hegemony arrived expecting to find a divided solar system, they instead found humans and Zephyrians working together. They found new technologies that combined human reliability with alien efficiency. And they found a mechanic from Detroit who had spent 6 months studying their ship designs and thinking about the best way to convince their machines to take a little nap. The Hegemony had learned from the Zephyrian defeat and designed their systems to be sabotage-proof. But they had made the same mistake many engineers made. They had focused so much on preventing known problems that they had created new ones. Jake Murphy walked into the garage that had become the unofficial headquarters of Earth's defense against impossible odds. On his workbench sat a new toolbox, bigger than his old one, but filled with the same simple, reliable tools that had always been enough to fix whatever was broken. Time to go to work, Jake said to himself, picking up his wrench. After all, every machine could be fixed, and every machine could be broken. You just had to understand how it worked and know which tool to use. The universe was full of machines that needed fixing, and Earth had found the right mechanic for the job.